It's another day and another Iranian general who's been taken out by Israel. This time, Israel has launched a devastating aerial campaign that has resulted in the death of one of Iran's leading war generals. Now, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is running scared. He's fearing for his life after an Israeli F-35 eliminated one of his top generals. On June 17th, news broke that a series of strikes conducted by Israel's F-35 pilots had taken out a top Iranian military commander named Ali Shadmani. This is huge. According to the Telegraph, Shadmani was brand new to the job, having only served in the role for about 4 days before an F-35 sniped him from the skies. How did this happen? Israel was blunt and direct about taking out Shadmani. The Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, would only say that a sudden opportunity arose for it to conduct the strike, which leveled a command center in central Tehran, taking Shadmani with it. We can speculate what that means. The odds are that Israel had eyes on Shadmani and was tracking his movements. As soon as he came out of hiding to go to the command center, an F-35 was on its way to take him out. Perhaps Mossad was involved. We know that Israel's highly secretive covert operatives are operating in Iran. As the Royal United Services Institute points out, Mossad agents played a key role in getting Israel's Operation Rising Lion off the ground. They were inserted into Iran to smuggle weapons into the country and sabotage its air defense systems before Israel launched its initial volley of strikes. Those strikes were extremely effective as a result, and there's a good chance that those Mossad officers are now working inside Iran, essentially directing traffic for the Israeli airstrikes to come. Shadmani is one of the latest and most important victims of one of those strikes. Dubbed Iran's wartime chief of staff by the Telegraph, Shadmani was a key aide to Ali Khamenei and had only been appointed to his position on June 13th, when the first series of Israel's airstrikes killed his predecessor, Major General Gholam Ali Rashid. The Telegraph says that Shadmani was not just the most senior commander in the Iranian armed forces, but also the military figure closest to the Ayatollah. The Times of India provides more information on its June 17th report on Shadmani's death. It says that the IDF took to X soon after killing Shadmani to announce his death. For the second time in 5 days, the IDF has eliminated Iran's wartime chief of staff, the regime's top military commander. Ali Shadmani, Iran's senior-most military official and Khamenei's closest military advisor, was killed in an IAF or Israel Air Force strike in central Tehran, following precise intelligence. Again, more fuel to the fire of Mossad involvement. According to the Times of India, Shadmani had previously served as the leader of Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya central headquarters, which is the seat of Iran's emergency command. That likely means that he was playing a key role in organizing Iran's response to Operation Rising Lion. In his new role, he was responsible for overseeing and coordinating between the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, and Iran's standing army. He was also responsible for managing combat operations and approving Iran's attack places. The Times of India reports the IDF as saying, the IDF adds that, in his various roles, he had a direct influence on Iran's offensive plans targeting the state of Israel. That's why this successful strike is so huge. It's part of a wider decapitation strategy in which Israel is taking out every military leader Iran has. As the Telegraph points out, Shadmani is just the latest in an increasingly long line of key Iranian military figures who've been killed during Operation Rising Lion. His predecessor, Gholam al-Rashid, was one of them. However, Israel has also taken out Ali Shamkhani, who was one of Khamenei's closest aides. Former Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces Mohammad Bagheri is also dead, as is Hossein Salami, who used to head the IRGC. Commander of the Quds Force Esmail Khani has also been killed, as has the commander of the IRGC's aerospace forces Amir Ali Hajizadeh. Israel has pulled all of this off in less than a week. The Telegraph reports that targeting these high-ranking military officials plunges Iran's war plans into disarray, making it almost impossible for Tehran to launch a serious response to Operation Rising Lion. As one unnamed military official told the news outlet, the supreme leader of Iran has a close circle of commanders around him, and the large majority of those commanders have been eliminated and are no longer a threat. Perhaps this isn't a decapitation strategy after all. If we consider Khamenei to be the head, Israel seems to be targeting everything below the neck. The arms, legs, and body of Iran's military are systematically being taken out, leaving nothing behind to prop Khamenei up as he tries to organize a response to the devastating airstrikes that are wrecking his country. Of course, you could also say this is a decapitation strategy for a simple reason. Israel may not have taken out the head of Iran, but it has destroyed the brain. All of this has happened as Israel pelts a huge variety of targets during Rising Lion. It's not just Iran's wartime leaders who are in the IDF's crosshairs. Everything from its key military sites to the country's nuclear facilities is being bombarded. Sky News reports that Israel's strikes have so far killed over 650 people, with civilians included, and are being carried out because Iran is coming dramatically close to creating a nuclear bomb. Beyond the likes of Shadmani, Israel has been taking out Iran's leading nuclear scientists and has hit nuclear sites including Natanz, which is located 135 miles southeast of Tehran, and the Fordow uranium enrichment plant located near the city of Qom. Natanz lies in ruins. The BBC reports that the International Atomic Energy Agency's Rafael Grossi believes that Israel's strikes have devastated the centrifuges at that plant, meaning Iran can no longer use them to enrich uranium to weapon-grade purity. Fordow represents a more difficult target. Built into a mountain, the facility is hundreds of feet underground, meaning Israel will need a bunker-busting bomb, namely the 14-ton GBU-57 that can only be dropped from an American B-2 stealth bomber to get the job done. But maybe it won't need to go that far. Taking out Iran's military leaders could be enough. With Shadmani gone, Khamenei now has to scramble to find somebody who's fit to replace him as Iran's wartime chief. He's quickly running out of options. 2 of the men he's had in the role have died in the last week, and there aren't many left in Iran who have the combination of intelligence and experience to take on the role. The question also has to be asked, who can Khamenei trust now? Is it possible that Mossad has been working with Iranian military personnel on the inside to achieve so much of its success? Maybe, maybe not. But these are the sorts of questions Khamenei is now being forced to ask as he scrambles for a new military chief. And worst of all for Iran's supreme leader, he knows that Israel has eyes on what he's doing. Anybody who he appoints becomes an immediate target. If that new chief heads to any of Iran's military headquarters, you can bet your bottom dollar that's where the next Israeli airstrike will be. If Khamenei wants to keep his next wartime chief alive, whoever that person may be would have to stay in hiding and try to conduct Iran's military affairs in secret. That's not how it's supposed to work. And this shows us just how effective Israel's strategy of hitting Iran's military leaders has been. Then there's Khamenei himself. With his inner circle dying around him, the question has to be asked, will Israel target Khamenei if it gets the chance? That was the question posed by CBS News in a June 17th article published in the wake of Shadmani's death. It says that Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, hasn't ruled out targeting the 86-year-old supreme leader, who he has dubbed the figurehead of what he describes as an existential threat to the existence of Israel. This could all be part of Netanyahu's plan to force regime change in Iran. After ordering the first wave of Operation Rising Lion attacks, the Israeli Prime Minister claimed, "Israel's fight is not against the Iranian people. Our fight is against the murderous Islamic regime that oppresses and impoverishes you," CBS reports. That brings us another twist to the conflict. Netanyahu is essentially saying that Khamenei should be the target. However, he's also suggesting that it may not have to be the IDF that sounds the death knell for Iran's leader. Netanyahu wants Iran's people to rise up against what he views as their oppressive leadership. Perhaps in his ideal world, it will be those people who do the final job for him by taking out Khamenei, so that Israel doesn't have to stain its hands with the blood of the country's leader. That's not to say that Israel won't target Khamenei if it feels it has to. Speaking to ABC News a day before Israel killed Shadmani, Netanyahu was quizzed on whether he thinks taking out Khamenei would escalate the Iran-Israel conflict. Netanyahu says no, if anything, it would end the fight. "We've had half a century of conflict spread by this regime that terrorizes everyone in the Middle East, has bombed the Aramco oil fields in Saudi Arabia, is spreading terrorism and subversion and sabotage everywhere," claimed Netanyahu. "The forever war is what Iran wants, and they're bringing us to the brink of nuclear war. In fact, what Israel is doing is preventing this, bringing an end to this aggression, and we can only do so by standing up to the forces of evil." That shows us how Netanyahu views Khamenei. To Israel's leader, Khamenei is a warmonger, a killer, a man who is spearheading Iran's push toward nuclear weapons and won't stop unless he's eliminated. That means he's a target, and he may not just be a target for Israel. There are now emerging hints that the US could get involved in a final strike designed to take out Iran's supreme leader. Netanyahu certainly wants that. In his ABC interview, he's appealed to the US and those in the country's administration who oppose the idea of aiding Israel in its campaign against Iran. "We're not just fighting our enemy," Netanyahu said. "We're fighting your enemy. For God's sake, they chant death to Israel, death to America. We're simply on their way, and this could reach America soon." Netanyahu appears to be trying to position Israel as the first bastion of defense against rising Iranian aggression. He not so subtly tells the US that it needs to be involved because Iran presents as much of a threat to the US as it does to Israel. Perhaps US President Donald Trump is starting to see it Netanyahu's way. If nothing else, he seems willing to make veiled threats toward Khamenei. Posting to Truth Social, Trump said the following on June 17th. "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but is safe there. We're not going to take him out. Kill, at least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin." As is so often the case, Trump is being ambiguous about what he's really planning to do in the wake of Shadmani's death and Netanyahu's calls for greater US involvement. Will the US offer to support Israel, such as delivering the bunker-busting bombs needed to take out Fordow? Perhaps. Given that Trump claims the US knows exactly where Khamenei is, will it participate in a strike designed to take out Iran's supreme leader once and for all? Nobody knows. And that's how Trump wants it. As for Khamenei himself, Trump reveals exactly what Iran's supreme leader is doing: hiding. So terrified is Khamenei of Israel's non-stop strikes taking out the likes of Shadmani and his many other military advisors that he has reportedly gone into hiding as Operation Rising Lion rages on. On June 15th, Iran International reported that Khamenei had been moved to an underground bunker somewhere in Lavizan, which is located in northeastern Tehran. It says that two unnamed sources provided the information, noting that Khamenei fled with his wife, Morjaba, by his side. However, two of the Supreme Leader's sons, Mossad and Mustafa, weren't with him. India Today says that this strategy of hiding and hoping that Iran can somehow stop Israel's strikes was practically confirmed when Khamenei recently delivered a televised address to the Iranian people. The outlet claims that its open-source intelligence, or OSINT, conducted a technical analysis comparing the video of Khamenei's June 18th speech against an address he delivered just 8 days before. Everything suggests the use of low-quality equipment in the second video, and that's a hint that Khamenei is in hiding. In the June 10th speech, the file size for the 3-minute and 37-second video was 24 megabytes. The June 18th video shows signs of compression. Despite the second speech being around 3 times as long as the first, its file size is only 18 megabytes. There are other signs. The June 10th video's bitrate was 892 kilobits per second, with its audio being 95.4 kilobits per second. On June 18th, the video had a bitrate of 256 kilobits per second, with audio quality plunging to a very low 2.4 kilobits per second. All of these are signs that Khamenei has fled to a hiding place. India Today also points out that Khamenei wore a lapel microphone in the June 18th speech, rather than using much higher quality stand microphones seen in the June 10th footage and most of the Supreme Leader's other speeches. The technical issues the outlet's OSINT detected also suggest that Khamenei's latest speech was recorded using downgraded or even improvised equipment, which again points toward a shift in location. The low-quality video suggests that Khamenei is speaking from a more secure site, likely the sort of underground bunker Iran International claims he's currently hiding in. What we appear to have here is an Iranian leader who's trying to project strength at a time when he's terrified for his own life. While his commanders and closest advisors die around him, alongside the civilians of his own country, he's safely sequestered away in a bunker where he believes the bombs can't get him. We say safely. If Trump is to be believed, the US and likely Israel know exactly where he is. A bunker bust like the one that needs to be used to take out Fordow could also be enough to kill Iran's leader. Alternatively, Israel may wait for him to emerge from hiding or hope that Iran's people take the disappearance of their supreme leader as a sign that it's time to force regime change to stop the airstrikes. Whatever the case may be, two things are certain. Ali Shadmani is dead and Khamenei is running scared. Now let's deal with the elephant in the room and ask the key question: what if, after taking out the brains, arms, legs and body of the Iranian military structure, Israel decides to pull the trigger on taking out the head? What happens if Khamenei is killed in an Israeli airstrike? The Bulwark has some ideas, claiming that Khamenei's death would represent the greatest survival crisis that Iran has ever faced. Typically, succession in Iran's supreme leadership is a relatively smooth process. That's what we saw when Khamenei ascended to the role following the death of former supreme leader Ruhollah Khomeini. But even before Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, the succession plan for Khamenei wasn't anticipated to be as smooth. Iran International pointed this out in January 2024, noting that Khamenei had no one in his inner circle who offered the stature, power, or influence needed to ascend to the role. He has even fewer now. Israel is systematically taking out anybody Khamenei might have considered if he is to name a successor naturally. And with Israel's bombs dropping while Khamenei is in hiding, choosing a successor will be the last thing on the mind of the supreme leader. He's focused on survival. But what he may not realize is that his death, be it by Israel's hand, his own people, or even natural causes, will plunge Iran into uncertainty at a time when it needs to be presenting a united front against Israel. Chaos would reign in Iran. That's according to French President Emmanuel Macron. The Times of Israel reports Macron as saying, "The biggest mistake today is to seek regime change in Iran through military means, because it would lead to chaos." Macron was speaking toward the end of the June meeting between the group of 7 nations, and he pointed to recent history to prove his point. Does anyone think that what was done in Iraq in 2003 or what was done in Libya the previous decade was a good idea? No, he added. A power vacuum would form if Khamenei was taken out. And the risk with any type of power vacuum is that even more hardline elements in Iran, such as certain military leaders in the IRGC or Iran's army, would take Khamenei's place. If Netanyahu's goal is to end what he believes is a forever war with Iran, taking out Khamenei may not be the way to do it. Perhaps that's why Israel hasn't struck yet, given that it supposedly knows where Khamenei is hiding. It wants the Iranian people to start an uprising, bringing a more moderate and Israel-friendly successor to Khamenei along with him. There's also the issue of Russia to consider. On June 20th, Sky News reported on a rare interview it held with Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. He said that regime change in Iran is unimaginable. Peskov added, "It should be unacceptable. Even talking about that should be unacceptable to everyone." Putin's mouthpiece also made some veiled threats, telling Sky News that Russia would react negatively to the news of Khamenei's death by Israeli or US hands. Nobody knows precisely what that means, but Peskov appears to be hinting at the possibility of Russia becoming more involved in the Middle East crisis if Israel takes Khamenei out. Israel doesn't want that. So it may satisfy itself by taking out the entire structure around Khamenei, leaving Iran's supreme leader to remain in hiding while the rest of the country's regime crumbles. But something worse than Russian involvement may be on the horizon in the Israel-Iran war. What's happening now is just the beginning. The real firestorm starts now, as you'll discover if you check out our video where we cover what comes next in the conflict. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more up-to-date coverage on the latest developments in the Middle East crisis.